All right. Hi, Dr. Greger. We have you on board. Thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us. And Dr. Greger is very amazing. He is a vegan MD, vegan, and he founded nutritionfacts.org, which has a lot of videos, very useful videos on plant-based nutrition, which is really amazing. So thanks again for coming on board.
Happy
And
to be here.
awesome. So number one, I just wanted to ask, can you summarize your background and your journey to a plant-based diet?
Sure. It was my grandma, actually. I was just a little kid. My grandma got diagnosed with end-stage heart disease. She already had a number of bypass operations and basically kind of run out of plumbing at that point. So she was sent home to die, confined in a wheelchair, crushed chest pain. And then she heard on 60 Minutes about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, who ran this lifestyle medicine clinic.
Hmm.
And she went to see him, and they wheeled her in, and she walked out. And they put her on a plant-based diet, exercise, and she lived another 31 years to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. So she was diagnosed 65 and was able to hang on for a few decades, and that's what inspired me to go into medicine. And that's what I thought all medicine was. Like, you get really sick, you're in a wheelchair, you can't move, and then someone like lays hands, and poof, all of a sudden you're walking around 10 miles a day. I mean, just that, and that's, little did I know later, was that that's not how most medicine is practiced these days, and so that's why I really turned my attention towards practicing lifestyle medicine, or using kind of natural modalities to treat the cause of the disease rather than just treating the symptoms.
And when did you discover the benefits of plant-based diets then?
Oh I mean, so as a little kid, seeing my grandma all of a sudden
At that point?
miraculously get better, but my own diet did change until 1990 when Dr. D. Ornish published his landmark, a lifestyle heart trial,
Mm-hmm.
which proved for the first time kind of angiographic evidence you could reverse heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
A number one killer, both men and women, without drugs, without surgery, just with healthy plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was published in the most prestigious medical journal in the world. And I was like, oh, okay, number one killer. This reverses number one killer. Well, let's eat like this. And so I've been eating a plant-based diet for 24 years now. And just kind of look around and been like, okay, it was published 2 decades ago. Why are people still dying from heart disease? Like, why have hundreds of thousands of people? We have the cure. We have the miracle cure, yet hundreds of thousands of people continue to die unnecessarily. And so that has just driven me harder to go out there and try to spread this life-saving information as far as I can.
Okay, now interesting because when I speak with people, a lot of people think that moderation, balance is key, and that it's actually healthy to have a balanced diet, quote unquote, with meat, fish, eggs, and
Ah!
dairy.
All
So,
right.
how does your research support otherwise?
Well, I mean, moderation kills. You're just describing the American diet. You have a little bit of this, you get a little bit of that, and you die of heart disease, number one killer. Or you die of cancer, number two killer. Or COPD, or stroke, or on down the list, type 2 diabetes, hypertension. These are diseases that need not occur, but if you look at the populations where they don't occur, they don't eat moderation diets. They eat nearly strictly plant-based diets. If you look like rural Africa, rural China, these were eating, a meat was, like a holiday, celebration kind of food. But the day-to-day food was centered around basically, grains and vegetables. And they did not get these chronic degenerative diseases that are laying waste to Americans. And so it's like, if I had a smoking patient that came to me and said, all right, 1.5 packs a day, everything in moderation. No, I mean, if something's bad for you, you try to minimize it. If something's good for you, you try to maximize it. Like, in what other realm of, I'm going to wear my seatbelt half the time. Let's be moderate about it. I mean, every time. If it's a health behavior, you do it, or you try to do it, or at least you acknowledge that it's the thing to be done. if you really cared about your family's health.
Sure. So now, what's your opinion about grass-fed meat and eggs then?
But better than, the conventional factory farm. Like there's a study I profiled in one of my videos about comparing the effects of wild caught meat to kind of supermarket meat. It was done in Australia, so they used kangaroo meat, which is kind of like the venison of Australia. And they found that the spike of inflammation one gets within hours of eating conventional meat was less. They actually got less inflammation eating the kangaroo meat than the store-bought meat. Great, but I mean don't we want to eat food that doesn't cause any inflammation at all? In fact, most whole plant foods are anti-inflammatory. So better, sure, but it's like a low-fat Twinkie or a low-tar cigarette. I mean, like, okay, low-fat Twinkies, are they better? Begrudgingly, yes, they're better, but it's not like I'm going to tell anyone to go out and eat it.
Great. We'll explore the role of inflammation in a little bit. So with our diet, there's a new field called nutrigenomics. Well, a field. So, do you believe that it can really change our genetic predisposition?
Well, I mean, it changes our epigenetics. I mean, it changes genetic expression. So it doesn't change the genes itself, but how the genes are expressed. So, for example, the heart cell, a cell in our heart, has the exact same DNA complement as a brain cell and a muscle cell and a skin cell. Well, wait a second. A skin cell is totally different than a nerve cell. And why? It's because different genes are expressed. So we can dramatically change the expression of our genes and the health consequences thereof by what we do with our diet and exercise and smoking. And so, for example, the Alzheimer's gene, ApoE4, for example. If you have one copy, maybe doubles or triples your risk. You have two copies, maybe 9 times the risk of getting Alzheimer's, the so-called Alzheimer's gene. But if you look around the world, the highest rates of the ApoE4 variant are in Nigeria. They also have some of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's in the world. What solves the paradox? All you have to do is know what ApoE4 does. What is it? It's the principal cholesterol carrier in the brain. That's what the protein does. And so if your cholesterol is low enough, it doesn't matter what your genetic component is. And indeed, what they were eating traditional plant-based diets, such low cholesterol, it did not matter. And so no matter what bad genetic cards we've been dealt, we can still kind of reshuffle the deck with diet.
Interesting. Now, you talked about plant-based diet and inflammation. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you look at, any marker of inflammation, so for example, CRP levels, C-reactive protein levels, it's kind of a rough indicator of the amount of inflammation one has in one's body. The more whole grains one eats, the lower C-reactive protein. In fact, in general, the more whole plant foods, the lower levels you get in C-reactive protein. There's a marker of inflammation. Inflammation plays a role in many of our chronic diseases, such as diabetes and atherosclerosis. And so, in general, we want to eat anti-inflammatory, antioxidant foods. And that's describing plant foods. I mean, it's like the most uncontroversial statement in all nutrition is that fruits and vegetables are good for us. Well, what are fruits and vegetables, right? Fruit is the one part of the plant. And vegetables is the rest of the plant. So there's stem vegetables like rhubarb, there's root vegetables like potatoes, there's leafy vegetables like kale. But, I mean, you're basically, the most uncontroversial statement in all of nutrition is eat plants. And that's all people are saying. It's surprising there's so much pushback.
So now in terms of inflammation, you did mention that in one of your videos that we create DNA and muscle damage. More oxidative stress and need more antioxidant-rich foods when we exercise regularly. So especially for athletes, right? So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so free radicals, which is what we're quenching with antioxidants, are created within our own bodies. Now, I mean, pollution and what we eat, and there's all sorts of things that create free radicals. But literally just metabolizing glucose, which is, the metabolizing blood sugar to create energy to move our muscles. That process creates free radicals. So just like, burning fuel in a car produces exhaust, burning fuel ourselves creates these byproducts in our muscles. And so we need to eat antioxidants to prevent this kind of oxidative stress that leads to essentially rusting of our bodies. That's what rust is, oxidation of metal. And so aging in many diseases can be thought of as the oxidation or rusting of our bodies. But, how do you keep your fruit salad from turning brown, from oxidizing? You add lemon juice. What's lemon juice? Lemon juice has vitamin C. It's an antioxidant. It keeps things from oxidizing. It can do the same thing within our bodies. And so if you look at marathon runners, for example, and you take their white blood cells, you just draw a blood sample and look at their DNA in the white blood cells, about 10% of the DNA in about 10% of their cells is damaged. This is like ultramarathoners, like serious endurance athletes. And that damage may last for as much as 2 weeks after the marathon. And the thought is because of this extreme oxidative stress by that event. Now there's two types of antioxidants, and endogenous antioxidants and exogenous. Exogenous is the fruits and vegetables we eat, but we actually have antioxidant enzymes. We actually create antioxidants within our own body. So the thought is that part of the benefits of exercise is actually this oxidative stress causes the upregulation of antioxidants within our bodies. And so it's a good thing, like that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger kind of thought. And so maybe the concern goes, eating lots of fruits and vegetables to quell that oxidant stress from exercise might not be a good thing. And indeed, that's the case with antioxidant supplements. So antioxidant supplements actually prevent that beneficial effect of exercise, that upregulation of antioxidant enzymes. So antioxidant supplements should not be taken. But whole foods, and they've tested a number, whole plant foods, have the opposite effect. They have the best of both worlds. They prevent the DNA damage, they prevent the oxidant stress, but you still get that same boost in antioxidant enzymes. And really, to maximize the beneficial effects of exercise, we should eat lots of dark green leafy vegetables, the healthiest vegetables, and berries, the healthiest fruits.
Now, what about people who eat meat, right? What types of vegetables or fruit that contain superpowers that you think can help them further prevent exercise-induced oxidative stress, given the inflammation from meat as well as exercise?
Well, so the best data we have is on watercress, which is a particularly kind of spicy cruciferous vegetable, and it would be berries. Berries or citrus for on the fruit side. But basically, look, as many fruits and vegetables you can stuff in your face. So, one says, like let's say, broccoli is 15% healthier than cauliflower. But you really like cauliflower and not broccoli. So all you have to do is eat 6 florets of cauliflower instead of 5 florets of broccoli. You just made that 15%, right? I mean, so differences between fruits and vegetables might be such that you eat what you like. I mean, that's what's sustainable, right? If you hate Brussels sprouts, you're just not going to eat them every day for the rest of your life. You might eat them for a few days and kind of force them down. But, it's not a diet. The reason diets don't work by definition is because they're self-limited. You need to eat and live in a way you can really live the rest of your life this way. And so you got to say, what do I like to eat? What do I know? What's convenient? And kind of go through this. And so one needn't get all these kind of exotic berries into one's life necessarily. But if you have the choice, you have the means, you have the access, great! You should go out and eat as healthy as you possibly can.
Great. Now, what about plant protein that you suggest, especially for athletes? Are there, what would you recommend? And would you argue that these proteins are better than sources like whey and meat, since you've had a
The
videos? Yeah.
best source of plant proteins, the plant protein superstar,
Yeah.
is the legume kingdom, right? So that's beans, split peas, lentils, chickpeas. These are the healthiest sources. So whole food sources of protein are the healthiest sources.
Hmm.
So I do not recommend people eat protein powders and protein supplements. I mean, I think people are just being bulked by this multi-million, perhaps billion-dollar industry of athletic supplements. I mean, there's really, I mean, yes, you're getting your protein, but we're not deficient in protein. What we need is all these other wonderful nutrients. What we aren't getting enough of is folate, we aren't getting enough potassium, we aren't getting enough fiber. It's not found in protein powders, but it's found in the food, in the plant foods that provide protein. So you got to think about the baggage that you want to come along with your food. Food is a package deal.
Yeah.
And so I encourage people to eat whole foods rather than just, isolating out a protein somehow.
Now, let's talk a little bit about nuts, since you've had a lot of videos on it. Now, you mentioned that nuts and fruit do not lead to the expected weight gain
Mm-hmm.
in your studies. Can you elaborate on that? So, does this mean that we can eat as much nuts and fruit as we want?
I would encourage people, well, I mean, when I say it doesn't lead to the expected weight gain, if you look at the calories in nuts,
Hmm.
you would expect that, for example, if all of a sudden you started eating a handful of nuts a day,
Hmm.
that, you gain a couple pounds over a few months just because they're really calorically fat-dense foods.
Hmm.
But it turns out that doesn't happen. And the question is why? I mean, why can you instruct people to add, in some cases, handfuls, plural, of nuts to their daily diet and still not gain weight, in some cases even lose weight? And the reason, and so I go through all fascinating theories, and it comes out to be a number of things. Probably the biggest thing is that nuts are so satiating that you just naturally eat less of other foods during the day. So even though I didn't say cut down on any foods, I said just eat 2 handfuls of walnuts a day. I don't care what else you do. Just eating those 2 handfuls of walnuts, you're just like, ugh. And just throughout the day, your body naturally realizes how much calories it's getting, and she just cuts down on other food throughout the day. It also boosts your metabolism. So walnuts may boost our metabolism by about 10%. So even just sleeping, we burn more calories after having eaten walnuts. There's a number of other effects. So if you're eating whole nuts, you actually, unless you're chewing really good or eating nut butter, a lot of fat actually just passes right through you. You just don't, there's pieces of nuts that just don't get digested. And so you're actually not accounting for those calories. So there's a whole bunch of things that come together to suggest that one should not avoid nuts. In fact, nuts are really healthy. So protect against cardiovascular disease. So I encourage people to eat a handful of nuts and seeds every day. Can you eat as many as you want? I don't know how many. It depends how many you want. I mean, would I eat pounds of nuts? No, because it would crowd out all sorts of other healthy foods. We need to eat, but we need to center our diet around fruit, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts and seeds, mushrooms, herbs, spices. These are the healthiest foods, and as many as we can eat of them and the less of everything else, the better.
And the same goes with fruit, right?
More fruit, the better.
Great.
In fact, the number one, so there's this global burden of disease study funded by Bill Gates, done by the World Bank, largest study ever in the history of humankind on risk factors for disease. And in America, it's different in every country. But in the United States, the number one killer
Hmm.
is not eating enough fruit, according to them.
Oh, wow.
Number one killer. So I think number 2 was smoking, right? Not smoking. So, but it's more important to not to eat fruit than it is to not smoke. I mean, that was crazy. And because they basically went through each of the diseases and found out which proportion could be prevented by eating more fruit, and you add them all up, you're like, whoa, eat fruit. So I have a video coming out on that, I don't know, in a while. I queued it. It's queued up.
Great. There's a website that talked about how, our body requires saturated fats, since we talked about fats, from animals, well, as well as plant sources, but animal sources, and limit fruit and grain consumption to build testosterone. What's your take on that?
Well, if it's on a website, it must be true. No. No. So there is no. So the person just doesn't know basic biology. So there's no requirement at all for saturated fat. None at all. Zero. You could be on a zero saturated fat diet, and not only would you thrive, you'd actually do better. Because our body can saturate fats. I mean, our body makes all the saturated fat we need. Our body makes all the cholesterol we need. So we have zero daily requirement for cholesterol, zero requirement for saturated fat. And so when someone makes a statement like that, you have to question that just goes against basic biology. Then you just you throw everything else out, because if they don't even know basic biology, how can you listen to everything else they say? Now maybe they get just wrong on one thing and right about everything else, but it's just like, and don't eat fruits, don't eat whole grains. Whole grain consumption is associated with decreased hypertension rates, decreased diabetes rates. Fruit protects against stroke, protects against. It's like,
Yeah.
Wait, if you're suicidal, maybe then you want to eat a lot of saturated fat and not a lot of fruit. But like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that's interesting to know. Now, let's talk about supplements. We mentioned that earlier. You advocate taking B12 supplements. Correct me if I'm wrong. For vegans. Now, what other supplements do you think are worthwhile for vegans, as well as for meat eaters, to consider taking?
Oh, depending on where they live and how much sun exposure they get, vitamin D. We evolved running around naked in equatorial Africa all day, and so that's the level of vitamin D we're used to. We're never meant to live at this kind of latitude. Now, if you have white enough skin and you live at a reasonable latitude, kind of Atlanta to LA or south in the northern hemisphere, then you can probably get all the vitamin D you need throughout the year, getting 15 minutes of midday sun on forearms and face. But if you're darker skinned or you live in the rest of the U.S., then during the winter months, you're just not going to make ideal levels of vitamin D. So you need to, and look, and if you're inside at a computer all day or in a cubicle or not getting midday sun, doesn't matter if you live in Hawaii or Phoenix, you're just not going to make any vitamin D. So you need to take a supplement. So I recommend 2,000 international units of vitamin D a day.
Okay. Now, what supplements do you think that your audience should be a little bit more concerned about buying, or don't necessarily need to buy it?
Basically everything else. Because every penny that we spend on, multivitamin or something is a penny that we'd be spending on another bunch of kale or another pint of blueberries.
Cool.
There's just, Now, look, there are certain conditions. So if you're an alcoholic, you may need a number of, vitamin supplements. If you're pregnant, they have special needs. But unless there's a problem, no one need take, basically everything in the, we should get our nutrients from the produce aisle, not the supplement aisle.
So, in terms of prebiotic and probiotics, and their prebiotic supplements, why do you prefer prebiotic to probiotic supplements?
Okay, so the prebiotics are what feeds the good bacteria we have. Probiotics are the good bacteria. So presumably, if we don't have symptoms of gastrointestinal distress, such as chronic diarrhea or bloating, things like that, then you've got good bacteria doing their job, and so you just need to feed them. That's what most people are. Kind of the natural state. Unless you're doing something funky like taking antibiotics or something, then you should have good bacteria, so you got to feed them. And feeding them is, the prebiotics just means essentially fiber and resistant starch. Fiber. So our bacteria eat the fiber that we eat. That's the fuel for our bacteria. We have trillions and trillions. We have more bacterial cells in our body than human cells in our body. In fact, the bulk of a stool is actually not undigested food. It's actually bacteria. Literally. By mass, if you looked at it, more than half is literally just bacteria. We are a bacteria churning factory. They just keep dividing and dividing and dividing. I mean, and so no wonder they have such an important impact on our physiology. And so we have to feed them. We've got trillions, and we got trillions of pets. You wouldn't come home from work and not feed the dog. Well, you shouldn't, you know. And so eating fiber and the resistant starches, these are starches that aren't digested in our small intestine and are found basically the same places fiber is found, legumes, as well as raw oatmeal and I don't know, cold whole wheat pasta and things like that. But basically, fiber is found in all whole plant foods.
So now, what about probiotics? If people were to buy them, how would you suggest them to purchase them, and how would you suggest them to select their supplement, this probiotic supplement?
So if they just had a course of antibiotics or something, where you wipe out the good bacteria in your gut, I think maybe a good idea to do a course of probiotic supplements. And how you do, you get a mixed acidophilus product, and you buy it, you take it home, and you take 2 bowls of milk, whatever kind of milk you want, and open up a capsule and put it into one bowl, not the other bowl, and then you go to bed and you wake up in the morning and you pour both bowls in the sink, and they should look different. The one with the probiotics should be foamy and filmy and bubbly and gross. And if they both look the same, then the probiotic is dead. It only works if it's a lot. So you take it back to the store and get your money back. So you just got to test it. So otherwise, I mean, it may be in a fridge or refrigerated section at the store, but maybe it's been sitting in a hot truck for a week. You have no idea. So you just got to test it before, to make sure it works.
Great. Now, in terms of health foods in the community, your research shows, for certain foods like spirulina, like kombucha, like kimchi, you recommend against eating such foods. Why is that? And what other health foods should we be aware of?
So they've all had been associated with adverse effects. Now, some of these are rare. So, for example, in kombucha, there's just a few case reports of this life-threatening lactic acidosis, where basically your body gets so acidic, you kind of fall into a coma and then die if you don't get rapid therapy. It happens rarely, but, why not eat something that it doesn't happen at all? It's like, there's no lactic acidosis comas from broccoli ever. Not one ever reported. Okay, I'll stick to it. Unless there was something that you couldn't find anywhere else, right? Then maybe you take the risk. But otherwise, why do it? So, blue-green algae has neurotoxins. Spirulina has neurotoxic contaminants. Kimchi is interesting. You'd think kimchi would be really healthy, right? It's just, cabbage, garlic. I mean, these are really healthy foods. But they've been associated with the people that eat kimchi. Korean researchers found people that eat kimchi have higher rates of certain cancers. And the question is why? We're not sure. It may be because of the inflammatory effect of actually the what we would assume would be healthy, these probiotic lactobacillus. It's possible that even when cooked dead, they could kind of trigger inflammation, get these so-called endotoxins, which are part of the bacterial cell walls, could, under some circumstances, get absorbed into the system and trigger this inflammation. The body's thinking, bacteria! And cause an adverse effect. We really don't know. But until studies start showing that kimchi is associated with less cancer, or at least no more extra cancer, it's probably not a good thing to eat.
Great. Are there any other health foods we should be aware of that you have not published?
I did something on star fruit saying it was a little high in oxalic acid. What else have I? It's a bunch of supplements that had adverse effects too. But in terms of whole plant foods, very few I can think of.
What about, say, the nightshades, like eggplants? What are your thoughts on that?
about 1 in 20 people with joint pain improve removing nightshades from their diet. So, tomatoes, eggplant, bell peppers. But for the other 19 out of 20, even with joint pain, doesn't do anything for them. So, for the vast majority of people, nightshades are fine. But look, if not eating nightshades makes you feel better, don't eat nightshades. I mean, no doctor can tell you more than your own body can tell you. So, fine. It's kind of like the gluten issue. There are rare individuals that have gluten problems. For them, you stay away from gluten. But that doesn't mean gluten is bad for everybody. Someone has a peanut allergy and they die from eating peanuts. Doesn't mean everybody dies from eating peanuts. It's just,
So now, this leads me to the topic of soy. You do advocate soy in your videos, and correct me if I'm wrong. Now, what about authorities that associate soy with diseases such as infertility and breast cancer? Can you elaborate on that and your take on that?
Well, I would certainly question the title of authority if someone. So there's been, we didn't know. There was contradictory laboratory animal data on breast cancer in soy up to 2009. And so it depended on whether it was a hamster or a rat, depending on what happened, whether it got better or worse. But we had no idea until 2009. With the first human study, finally we had cancer survivors split up into 2 groups, half eat soy, half don't eat soy. What happens? And what happens is that the women that eat soy live longer, have lower relapse rates. Right? So soy is beneficial for breast cancer survivors. There has been a total of 4 such studies done on breast cancer survivors to date, starting in 2009, and every single one, 4 out of 4, show benefits. And so that's it. I mean, there's only been 4 studies. They've all shown the same thing. So anyone who suggests that soy is bad for breast cancer is either living before 2009, hasn't checked the literature in the last 5 years, or doesn't believe the scientific method, or who knows. But that's what this. It's not even the balance of science. That's all the science we have. All points in one direction with breast cancer.
Now, what about commercially produced as well as GMO soy? Is your view going to be different, or? Almost all GMO soy is just animal feed, and that's where GMO soy and corn go, is to feed livestock. But if you don't want to get GMOs, you buy organic. Okay.
So organic soy, by definition, by the 2002 USDA organic standards, can't have any GMOs.
Okay. Now, lastly, in terms of enzymes in foods, right? I was a little bit confused when I saw the statement. You said you'll hear folks in raw food community waxing poetic about enzymes, the importance of preserving the activities of plant enzymes, which are destroyed by cooking. Skeptics, on the other hand, indignantly assert that we have no use for plant enzymes since we are animals and that we make all the enzymes we need. Well, both sides are wrong. That's what you said. Why is that?
Well, you can watch the video. So I have lots of it's a fascinating story. And I love that both sides are so wrong, because that just means there's a whole, wonderful area to explore. Ripe for a lot of humor, a lot of playfulness. And so in fact, I just did a new video maybe last week called A Second Strategy for Cooking Broccoli, where I talk about the whole new spin on the whole enzyme issue. So it turns out that there in only 2 cases that we know of do plant enzymes have any kind of beneficial effects. And one is the enzyme that kind of activates the so-called active ingredient in allium vegetables like garlic. And the other one is the one that activates the so-called active ingredient in cruciferous vegetables, cabbage family vegetables, like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collards, etc. And so so if you take broccoli and you throw it in a pot of boiling water without chopping it up first, all the enzymes that create, it's kind of like one of those chemical flare reactions where 2 chemicals mix and create light. Well, the same thing happens in broccoli. where there's two cell components that are separated. One is an enzyme, and one is what the enzyme uses to create this wonderful, miraculous substance called sulforaphane, which is associated with lower breast cancer rates and all sorts of other wonderful things. But those two chemicals don't mix unless the plant is chopped or chewed. But if you don't chop or chew and just throw it in boiling water when you're making broccoli soup or something, then the enzyme is destroyed, and so all you have is this precursor, which doesn't do you any good. But if you chop the broccoli, and so then normally when you make broccoli soup, then you cook the broccoli, then you put it in a blender. But if you do the other way, we put raw broccoli in a blender, you blend it first, you break the cells open, the enzyme mixes with the precursor, and you get all this wonderful product that you want, and the product is then resistant to heat. So you can cook it all you want after you've chopped it and waited 40 minutes, because who needs the enzyme anymore? It's done its job. And so then you can cook the soup and you're fine. So enzymes create these phytonutrients into these two cases, garlic and the broccoli family of vegetables. The enzymes create phytochemical products that have beneficial effects. They're destroyed by cooking, but we can get the benefits of raw by eating cooked by just pre-chopping, waiting 40 minutes for the enzyme to have its effect. Then we can cook it all we want. The second strategy, this new video I just came up with, said, well, look, why not just add the enzyme directly? And we can do that with mustard powder. Mustard greens are a cruciferous vegetable. Mustard greens come from mustard seeds, and mustard seeds powdered up are called mustard powder. And so that basically is just getting a jar of morosinase, a jar of active enzymes, cruciferous family enzymes. And so you can cook the broccoli all you want, even without pre-chopping. You just take it out and you sprinkle a little raw mustard powder on top, and it activates all those, and the precursor's still there, the enzyme's just dead, but you add the enzyme and all the sulforaphane you want is made, and so then you don't have to pre-chop to get all the benefits. Or you can just eat raw, and then poof, you got them right there.
Okay, great. Because I was a little bit confused, because another video that I saw, you said that our body makes all the enzymes we need to function from the protein we eat, and cooking actually renders proteins more digestible. So if you don't mind elaborating on that, that'll be great.
Yeah, so enzymes are proteins. We make we make our enzymes with amino acids, which are all proteins are made out of. Where do we get these amino acids? From the food we eat. So basically, we eat kidney bean, and we chop up the kidney bean proteins into amino acids, and then we build all the digestive enzymes and all the enzymes we need in our body. And so we don't need to take in enzymes themselves to function. When we eat enzymes, what we do is we chop the enzyme up into little amino acids, and then we build our own enzymes out of them. There's a number of cases in which cooking enhances the bioavailability of certain nutrients. It's not what we eat, it's what we absorb, so you get 3 times as much lycopene, red pigment in cooked tomatoes and raw tomatoes, more beta-carotene in cooked carrots and raw carrots. But basically, eat carrots however you want to eat them, right?
Sure.
I mean, eat broccoli. You like raw broccoli? Eat raw broccoli. Eat broccoli. I just want to see people stuffing their faces with fruits and vegetables.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Happy to help out.